That's a cooperation between the district, Soquel Creek Water District, as I will say, and the City of Santa Cruz. Both agencies independently were looking for supplemental water supply, and both of them decided that desal was something worth investigating, and since both of us were looking at that, we decided to see if we could cooperate and do something together rather than duplicate ourselves and do everything independently.
That task force was tasked with doing all of the investigation surrounding the feasibility of a seawater project in Santa Cruz. So preceding that was all of the alternatives investigations, so more groundwater, more surface water, recycled water, things like that. In 2005, we said, well, desalination looks very feasible, but now let's spend the next period of time ensuring that's true.
Well, very simply, it's just taking salt out of salt water, or in this case, ocean water, and making drinking water out of it. And that's done through a reverse osmosis process, which is the same sort of thing that people buy and put under their sinks in their homes to make sure their water is pure. It literally takes all the impurities out of the water.
So since 2005, we've done a year-long study on the water quality of the ocean water. We've done a year-long study looking at any impacts to the marine life because of an intake that would be put into the bay. We've studied the brine disposal and different ways of disposing of the brine. We've looked at energy and greenhouse gases.
6-7 years ago, when we put together a pilot plant, the state requires us to do that to make sure that it actually works. And that was done out at Long Marine Lab, and it was up for, like 2 years, and we did tours through the place, and people got to see what it was like and how it worked. And we tried various options because we got a grant to build part of that, and so we were able to try various techniques and see which ones are the most effective at purifying the water. And then since then, we've done a number of studies to see what are going to be the environmental impacts of this sort of thing. So usually the two things are important. One is the intake, where you're taking seawater and making sure you're not sucking up a lot of marine life and killing it. And then finally, when you take the salt out of the water, it produces extra salty water, and you need to make sure that when that goes back in the ocean, that doesn't cause any harm. And that's done here by mixing it with the outfall of the sewage treatment plant at the City of Santa Cruz.
We've looked at the geophysical nature of the coastline nearby, and then ultimately we're working on the EIR, and that's a big part of this, is understanding the impacts or the proposed, the potential impacts of such a project.
You also need to look at climate change. The county has recently done a study that they just published by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, about climate change in our county. And it showed for our area that the groundwater recharge, the water that rains and soaks into the ground to replenish the groundwater, is going to be reduced by 30% by the end of the century. So it means whatever we have now, we're going to have even less going forward. So we need to not just do this one-time repair, but we need to make sure that that kind of low level of usage is sent through the entire century, so that we don't have that problem again.
Water is our most necessary resource, perhaps after air, but it is a scarce resource, and not only we and all our human activities depend on it, the whole natural environment depends on having adequate water flowing in the streams, remaining in the underground aquifers, preventing seawater from intruding, all of those things. And so the CWC wants the city to run its water system to protect and enhance the natural environment and to protect existing water users as the city is considering making more water available, and particularly to the biggest water user here, the university.
Well, a number of alternatives have been discussed, and every time one comes up that someone suggests, we go off and study that and see, does it really work? And most of them, they might have some benefit, but they don't produce enough. We need to reduce our water usage by a huge amount, and so it's it's a giant hill to climb to be able to solve that problem. And so most of them might give you a little bit, but we need that much.
Conservation is part of the proposed desal project. It's not just stop conserving and go to desal. You know, Santa Cruz and in our area, Aptos, Soquel, Capitola, they're really good about conserving already. So squeezing more water out of conservation, we're going to try our best, but you know, there's a threshold that people pretty much say, I've done my best.
Reducing consumption as a way to getting to the good life, not to the bad life, but to the good life. And, you know, there are whole philosophical systems based on that, and it is a politically relevant thought today. Can we build a better life by doing less instead of doing more?
The mandatory restriction option that we're looking at is going to, you know, install really low, ultra low flow devices that would allow people to, you know, maintain somewhat of a similar lifestyle but not use as much water. But it boils down to 53 gallons per person per day for 20 years.
The current number for the cost is something like $120 million. Now that's with a 30% sort of margin of safety, so it may actually be less, or could it be more, but we put in a margin of safety just to try and make sure it doesn't go over that. And then that's split between the district and the city.
Minimizing costs, reducing costs, eliminating costs, not spending as much but spending less is a way to drive us, I think, towards good political decisions. I was here really when the university started, is sort of when I moved to town. And it's been a real positive impact in a million different ways. But the impacts go both ways. It's not all positive. There's some negative impacts. And continued excessive growth is frankly what's wrong with our society in general. We built our whole civilization on the idea that everything has to grow. Every year it's got to be more. Every year it's got to be bigger. Every year you got to use more resources, consume more resources, and we're hitting the limit.
Our ultimate goal is to produce a safe, reliable source of drinking water for a community.
Some of the disadvantages is we do have these environmental impacts we need to look at, but we're doing, I think, a pretty good job of reducing those down as low as they can. One of the other aspects about it, of course, the cost, as you mentioned, and it uses a lot of energy. And for that, we intend to use renewable energy supplies, almost like the Australians did with the desal plant they put in Perth. That's a plant that's about 25 times bigger than the one we're proposing, and they did the whole thing wind-powered. So it uses no fossil fuels to power that plant. And we're going to do something similar to that for our plant.
We have a lot of very complicated and technical information that we're putting together and then going to have to communicate to the public. And that's been one of our biggest challenges, is taking, you know, 7, 8, 9 years of material and distilling it into a way that people can feel comfortable, that they're getting the full story, and that they're actually getting the full story.
People who are interested in desalination for all of the reasons I've talked about, and people who are interested in UCSC growth for the reasons that are obvious, they have a common cause in that, hey, let's not have a damaging or destructive, at least potentially, desalination plant. Let's live within our existing resources, use them, conserve them, inject water use efficiency into the way we do things, and we won't need to have a desalination plant, and the university will have to figure out a different way to grow and not just plow under a couple of 100 acres up on this natural reserve area.
I think it would be very difficult for people to vote yes or no right now. I mean, it's more of kind of a religious belief in a project or not a project to say yes or no without having the education to really vote yes or no on what that means.
Our main focus is to educate and inform people about the project, about the evaluation on hand, and we're looking forward to having the community participate in the coming months as we release the environmental impact report and hold public meetings to gather input.